Welcome back, guys. This video is about your driving test. So you've managed to book a driving test. Congratulations. They're quite difficult to book in the first place, but this video is just going to run through what it's going to be like on the day of your test. So the preparation, the build up, the actual test itself, how to stay calm, and hopefully getting that pass certificate at the end of the test. Okay, so let's say it's your first test. Okay, you're not going to know what's going to happen unless you've done lots of mock driving tests with your driving instructor. You're generally not going to understand or realize what's going to happen on the day of test. I'm just going to outline this to you now. So thinking about your test, let's say, for example, you've booked your test for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. Okay, most driving instructors will always want to pick up an hour before the test starts. So if your test is at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, they're probably going to want to be with you at 9 o'clock on that Tuesday morning. Okay, it's going to give that instructor or the person who's sitting in the test or helping you with your driving lessons, it's going to give them time to go through things they need to go through. So we need to check your license before you start. Before you leave your house, you want to make sure you got your license. Okay, make sure that you've got everything you need. So if you're going to wear glasses, please bring glasses as you would for a normal driving lesson. I always suggest bringing a drink or a snack or something like that, because you know you're probably gonna get a bit nervous. You're probably gonna want a drink, or you probably want to have a little I don't know, chocolate bar or something like that, just to keep you kind of ticking over. Anyway, so let's say you've been picked up at 9 o'clock. That's going to give you time to go for a drive. So let's say the test centre is like 15-20 minutes away from where you live. That's going to give you time to warm up. It's going to give you time to perhaps practice a parking manoeuvre, maybe a bit of parallel parking. It's also going to give you a chance to kind of drive around the test centre and kind of just loosen up a little bit. I always like to say you want to get all your mistakes out of the way in the first hour with your instructor, and then obviously you can have a near perfect drive on the test with the examiner. You want to get to the test centre about 15 minutes before kickoff. And what I mean by get to the test centre is not actually in the building itself, not in the car park, because really you're only allowed in the car park, if they've got a car park, about 5 minutes before the test. So park up around the corner. Sometimes you can park up round the corner, sometimes you can park up on a side street or somewhere like that, and just kind of go through the processes of trying to remember everything you've practiced. Try and chill, try and relax. You're going to need to do your show me tell me questions, so you want to make sure you're up to speed with all the show me tell me questions. Perhaps open your bonnet and make sure you know everything is underneath the bonnet. Okay, once you're a few minutes away, so once you're just around the corner, you can watch for, if you can see, that is, you can watch the learner drivers come out of the test centre from the previous test. So if there was a test at, let's say, 8:30, you could keep an eye out for those guys leaving. They've completed their test, for example, and then with about 5 to 7 minutes before the test starts, you could go into the car park, or you could park up outside the test centre. Make sure you park in a bay which is labelled for learners, because sometimes they have staff car parks and they also got the learner car park. So just make sure you park into a space which is actually for you, not one of the staff members or an examiner or motorbikes or something like that. So make sure you park into a bay. And the advice would be to reverse into a bay, because when the examiner does come out, you're going to need to drive off. So you don't want to drive into a space to then have to only reverse out of the space at the start of the test. That just kind of seems a bit tortuous, really. So make sure you've reversed into a space if you're going into a bay in the test centre. Grab all your bits and pieces, so make sure again that you've got your licence with you when you get out of the car. Wander into the test centre, and then you're going to be having to sit down, or you can stand up, and at the time specified, so if your test was at 10 o'clock, the examiner should come out and they'll call your name. Okay, once they've called your name, you're going to stand up, obviously say hello, good morning, whatever, and they're going to ask to see your driving license. They will check it with a UV pen and make sure it's a real deal, make sure it's a real thing, and they'll get you to read and sign the declaration on the actual iPad. It says that you've been in the country for the last 185 days within the last 6 months, and your car is insured for the purpose of the test. So pretty straightforward, I hope. They'll ask if your email's still the same, because when you pass, hopefully they'll send a copy of the report, should we say, or even if you fail, they'll send the report to that email address to make sure that's up to date. And yeah, basically that's about it. They'll then ask if you want your instructor to come along, or your accompanying driver, and then do you want them there for the debrief as well? So they say, do you want them there for in the back of the car, and do you want them there for the debrief? And hopefully the answer is yes to both of those questions, because I like to have I like to sit in the back of my test with my pupils to see what happens, see where they go. Basically, you will then wander out to the car park, and the examiner will ask which vehicle is yours. So obviously you know which one yours is, and then they'll get you to read a number plate. So from about 20-ish meters. If you have major trouble with this, being able to read the number plate, they will get you to read another number plate. And if you're still struggling, they might even go back into the test center and get a tape measure out and actually measure out the correct distance. But it's roughly about 20-21 meters. They've got lots of vehicles they can generally do the test for the eyesight check on. Wander over to your vehicle. If you're going to do the tell me question at the start, they'll say to you, we're now going to do a safety question, and it's could you tell me X, Y, and Z? So that's one of the show me, tell me questions. That might involve you opening the bonnet. So if that's the case, they'll say, would you like to open the bonnet, but do not start the engine, and could you show me, could you tell me where X, Y, and Z is, and could you explain how you would check this, that, and the other? So obviously if you're learning those questions, you'll know the answers to those questions. Once you've done this, they will then say, thank you very much, I would like you to get into the car, make yourself comfortable, but do not turn the engine on. That's what they'll say. At that point, hop in, get comfortable, take a few deep breaths, because you want to be focused. They will then walk around the car to make sure it's in roadworthy condition and it's got 4 wheels and so on and so forth. And then they'll jump in the car in the passenger seat, and they'll, if you're doing it with your driving instructor, they'll take a note of the license number, and then they'll briefly explain to you the layout of the test. So they'll explain what's going to happen for you, which is, you know, what's going to happen in the next 35 to 38 minutes roughly. Pay attention. Those bits of information are really important. If at any point you do have a question and you're unsure, do feel free to ask, because they are just human beings at the end of the day. They are not going to be, you know, they're not going to be upset if you ask a question, because they want you to understand the process. They want you to be clear on what's going to happen. It's a test of your driving ability, not your mental ability or your navigational skills or anything like that. So it's important that you're clear and they're clear that you're clear, so everyone's happy and it's a fair test essentially. One thing to note is when you get out of the test centre, if it's like a car park, take your time, think about what's going on. Hopefully when you've come into the car park, you've had chance to have a look at the layout of the car park, you know, going in and out. So you might be able to kind of predict what's going to happen as you go out. So there might be a stop junction. If it's a stop junction, you've got to stop. It might be really narrow. Sometimes these car parks are super narrow. So just perhaps just take a little bit of extra care over that as well. Once you're out and you're going, good luck. Concentrate. The first 5 minutes are really important, because you're going to be nervous and you want to try and get over those nerves. And once you're into it, and the first 5 minutes are really important, you'll probably forget the examiner sat next to you, to be honest, because that's just the way it goes. A lot of my pupils say to me, oh, I didn't even realise that guy was sat next to me. It was so relaxing. I was in the zone. So the first 5 minutes, really important that you don't make any serious errors, obviously. But once you then get back to the test centre and you've done the test and you've carried out your manoeuvre, and you may have done an emergency stop depending on whether you're the lucky one and the independent driving, you'll get back to the test centre, and what will happen is the examiner will then tot up the faults if there are any, and they will give you the result there and then. So they'll say, congratulations, you've passed, or I'm really sorry, you've not passed today. Either way, they will explain the next step. So if you failed, they'll say that you're going to get an email and, you know, good luck, take more lessons, you need to work on this, that and the other. And if you do pass, they might even explain to you if there were any faults, where the faults were. They will issue you a certificate, so a small paper certificate, and that you are allowed to drive on. So if you were to have a car at home and you wanted to drive that very same day, as long as you contact your insurance company, that certificate will be valid as like a driving license. So if you were pulled over by the police, you can just produce your certificate. The license usually takes about 4 to 5 days, working days. They say it takes a lot longer, but it doesn't. It usually gets there quite quickly. And once that's all through to you, you've got your full license, and you know, congratulations. That is the process in a nutshell. What I'll do is I'll add a couple more videos about this in the future. If you did like it, feel free to comment, like, and maybe even hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next video.